Hey guys, thanks for joining us. Today's video is a small Bible study class that we do at our church, where I'm incorporating some of the methodology of STS and beginning to slide in some Discovery Bible Study methodology as well. But we had just a really good discussion today about Peter being delivered from prison, where Herod had arrested him with the intent of putting him to death. So I would love to see any comments you have about the story or the discussion, or if you have questions or comments, we'd love to see that. Also, at the end of the video, I finally learned how to put the subscribe button on. Now, it's not till the latter part of the video, but if you'd like to subscribe, just hang on for maybe a minute and a half. I haven't figured out how to move the subscription thing yet. So anybody knows how to do that, message me. But enjoy the story. Thank you for giving us time to hang out, and just pray that you can speak to us through your word. From your son's name we pray. So, this story, I started to do the whole story of Peter in prison and being released and all that, but I thought, I don't want to rush through that, because there's a lot of good stuff there. But the disciples, there's an inner circle of Peter, James, and John. James and John, of course, were brothers, the sons of thunder. Jesus nicknamed them. It's interesting because the inner three, the inner circle, those are the only three that Jesus gave nicknames to. The sons of thunder, and then Peter, who's Simon. Jesus is the one that said, you're going to be called Peter. And just before this story, Herod, it's always confusing. Herod the Great was king when Jesus was born, and he was kind of a religious mutt. Claimed Judaism, but really wasn't so much. And so that was when he was building the temple to try to get on the good side of the Jews, because the Jews were kind of like,
So he wasn't Jewish by birth.
Yeah, not precisely. He kind of came from a mixed bag, and he was basically raised in Caesar's home, so he was more Roman than many Romans, for that matter. And some say had Cleopatra as his girlfriend before what's his name did. So he was a brave guy, very handsome, great warrior, but over the years he became very scared of being overthrown, and so had a lot of his family members killed. So his son's name was Herod Antipas, who's the one that had John the Baptist killed, because Herod married his sister-in-law, when he was, so when after John the Baptist died, then he had a son. Herod Antipas had a son named Herod Agrippa. So it's kind of that whole, I can't imagine a family that keep using the same names. I mean, you got to get creative. Oh, wait a minute. Never mind. Moving right along. So just before this story, Herod Agrippa is starting. He's trying to make inroads with the Jews, and as we've seen, as we've kind of had this build up through Acts, the Jewish leadership is getting more and more concerned about the way. They're not Christians yet, by the way. Nobody is a Christian yet, because that name has not been has not been penned. And so these leaders, they're seeing more and more of their people turn to the way. And so they're really threatened. And we're going to see in a little later on in the book of Acts that even many of the priests came to faith in Christ. So even among the leadership, people are turning to Jesus. Now, earlier on in the book of Acts, when when the movement was first starting, Peter and the disciples, Peter and John were arrested and they were released. Then later, Peter and the other disciples were arrested, and God supernaturally delivered them from prison. Then when they were called before the Sanhedrin, the Sanhedrin's like, yeah, would you mind coming with us? If you don't, be okay. Because they recognized something supernatural had happened. And so now, at this point, Herod has had James, one of the sons of thunder, killed, and the people and the religious leaders were like, yeah. And so now he's courting more of their approval, and he has Peter arrested. And so our story takes place the night before Peter was going to be killed by Herod. And so that's kind of where we are. So, and here's the story from the Word. Now, on that very night when Herod was about to bring Peter out, Peter was sleeping between two soldiers, bound with two chains, and sentries before the door were guarding the prison. And behold, an angel of the Lord stood next to Peter, and a light shone in the cell. The angel struck Peter on the side and woke him up, saying, "Get up quickly." And the chains fell off Peter's hands, and the angel said to him, "Dress yourself and put on your sandals." Peter did. And the angel said to him, "Wrap your cloak around you and follow me." So Peter went out and followed him, and he didn't know what was being done by the angel was real. But he thought that he was seeing a vision. And so when they had passed the first and the second guard, they came to the iron gate which led into the city, and it opened for them of its own accord. And they went out and along the street, and immediately the angel left Peter. When Peter came to himself, he said, "Now I'm sure that the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from the hand of Herod and from all that the Jewish people were expecting." Right? Somebody want to give it a shot? Try to repeat what you can remember. Anyone? Beulah?
I'll try, but I missed the middle because my baby started crying.
That's okay. So, that's all right.
Okay. How does it start? Okay.
On that very night.
Oh, okay. On the very night that Herod was going to bring Peter out, he was bound with two chains in between two guards. An angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, "Get up quickly, get your sandals on and get dressed, because we're leaving this place." And they walked out past a lot of, and now I'm just pulling on what I know before. They walked out past a lot of stuff that should have not opened, but it did, like all the gates and everything.
That's perfect.
Good.
Yeah, that's just right along the line. We'll go through it one more time here. So now on the very night when Herod was about to bring Peter out, Peter was sleeping between two soldiers bound with two chains, and sentries were before the door of the prison. Behold, an angel of the Lord stood next to him, and a light filled the cell. The angel struck Peter on the side and said to him, "Get up quickly." And the chains fell off of Peter's hands. And the angel said to him, "Dress yourself and put on your sandals." And Peter did. And the angel said, "Now, wrap your cloak around you and follow me." And so Peter went out and followed the angel, and he didn't know that what was being done by the angel was real, but he thought he was seeing a vision. When they passed the first and the second guard, they came to an iron gate that was leading into the city, and it opened for them of its own accord, and they went out and went along the street. And immediately the angel left Peter. When Peter came to himself, he said, "Now I am sure that the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from the hand of Herod and from all that the Jewish people were expecting." And there's our story. So, I wonder, what do you think it might have been like for Peter that he, obviously he would have known that James had been killed, right? And now the same people that were responsible for that have come and arrested him and placed him in jail, right? So what do you think it might have been like for him in that moment?
I feel like he would have just kind of resolved himself to know he was about to die.
Okay.
You know, like, because that's, I don't know, that's something that can be such a challenge. Like, you can see God work one way and then not the next, or that kind of thing. So it's like, oh, well, if God didn't rescue James, then, and it was his calling to die, then that's my fate as well. So I just kind of, not that he was necessarily bitter about that, but I just kind of see him, I imagine that he just kind of accepted it and was like, all right, because he was sleeping.
Yeah.
Do you know, like, I would have been, so I don't know, I feel like he was at peace with that, or he was exhausted, one or the other, but I would just think he was probably expecting death.
Okay, all right. Anybody else? I think it might have been like for him in that. When I do this story among some other people from some other cultures, the Christians just instantly go to, "Oh, he would have been fine. He had faith in God that God was going to do something." I'm going, where do you see that? It's because we'll talk next week about the prayer meeting that was going on, and as I was preparing for this, somebody was writing, this prayer meeting was going on. These people of great faith. And I'm going, have you read the story of what happened when God answered their prayer? Like, no, it can't be. How much faith was active there, right? So, well, let's just look at the first part. Now, on that very night when Herod was about to bring Peter out, Peter was sleeping between two soldiers, bound with two chains, and there were sentries before the door guarding the prison. Right, so we'll stop right there. So, what do we learn about Herod?
He's really worried about him escaping.
So he's obviously not sure of Peter's death coming right now.
Was it, I missed the intro that you gave. Was it Herod who killed James?
Yes,
so
just before this.
Okay.
Herod has killed James, one of the sons of thunder. Mm-hmm. At this point, what do we learn about Herod? That 2 out of the 3 of the inner circle are in the process of being taken out.
Oh yeah.
Right? Could that indicate anything about his knowledge of the core of the disciples? I mean, what do you? And you mentioned, the fact that he had all these guards and chains. Okay, you're not just chained to one guy; you're chained to 2, and then there's guards at the door. I mean, does this show us anything about Herod's understanding of the history of what God had been doing in the lives of these men?
Does this take place after or before Paul and Silas. This happens with Paul and Silas.
We're kind of leading into the Pauline aspect of Acts.
Okay.
He's kind of interspersed a little bit, but I don't think that has happened yet.
Okay.
Is this the same Herod that beheaded John the Baptist?
No, this is his boy.
His son.
Yeah. Yeah. So you had the Herod that killed all the babies, you had Herod that killed John the Baptist, and then you had Herod that killed James. So, fun
It's
family.
not confusing though.
So,
You're a little out of line for getting confused on that.
yeah, I can't believe you didn't get that straight. Are you even a believer?
I know.
So-
Well, these guys, they are historically just paranoid.
Yes.
About.
Yeah.
And they know, like, they've seen this, and it's like their history is, their family lineage is to fight against it.
Yeah, almost like it's in their DNA. Oh, God's doing something. We got to put a stop to that.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm sorry, I'm the worst at this because I always pull from other stories. But I was just reading about how Jesus, how one from the Pharisees instructed the rest of the Pharisees and said, like, listen, we don't need to do anything with Jesus because if he's like all the rest, his people are going to disperse.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
yes, and we would have wasted our time and given attention to something that wasn't necessary. And so it's kind of like Herod sees, wait, we killed the ringleader and more stuff is happening. So it's like what you mentioned. All right, let's go after the next level and see what we can do with that. It's kind of, I don't know. I've not ever considered the intentionality of that.
Well, let me ask a question. So, because it does seem like Herod's kind of serious about this. Do you think the soldiers realize the importance of their mission? As far as what it would cost them if this didn't go well?
I think that was the rule back then, that if you let the prisoner get away, you're going to get killed.
Yeah, but does it say what they were doing? Like, were they sleeping?
It doesn't. We're not told.
Or were
Yeah.
just are all of these guards blinded and just don't see what's happening?
Yeah, we're not told, but we do know that Peter was chained to two guys. That's pretty serious mess right there. But I mean, how attentive do you think these guys were probably being? Just like Patricia said, knowing.
I think they were, and it was just supernatural that they didn't, that they walked right by two sets of guards, and then the door opened to the jail, and I mean, I don't think they were aware of the angel and Peter going through there.
Yeah, I find it interesting. We're not told anything about them, right? But
I see them like, it's interesting that I hadn't really thought about this before, but they're chained too. Like, they're not really any better off than Peter, because if they mess up, then they're dead too.
Yeah.
And they're sitting in the jail cell with chains. Like, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? They're kind of equal with them in some ways.
Oh, yeah.
Well, is this story told in any of the other Gospels?
No, this is in Acts. So this is in Acts. So yeah. So we're
Okay.
the Acts of the Apostles.
Okay.
So
this,
Acts of the Holy
this
Spirit.
is not
actually.
in
So
the first four.
It would be nice to have 4 of them
it would.
for these
Yeah.
stories.
Different
Yeah.
Really
perspectives.
help us out with these
Yeah.
questions.
Especially with the birth of the church, you're like, there's we'd like a little bit more perspective on that. So, because everybody goes, our way of doing church is the right way.
Yeah.
And you go, well, in the book of Acts, we're not really told. So, let's look at the next part of this story. So, behold, an angel of the Lord stood next to Peter, and a light shone in the cell. And the angel struck Peter on the side, and woke him and said, "Get up quickly." And the chains fell off of Peter's hands, and the angel said to him, "Dress yourself and put on your sandal." And Peter did. And the angel said to him, "Wrap your cloak around you and follow me." And Peter went out and followed him. And he didn't know that what was being done by the angel was real. So let's just stop right there. So what do we learn about Peter from the fact that, I mean, is he like dozing?
No, sound asleep, or he wouldn't have struck him in the side to wake him up.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, because it says, so if this is the order of it, it says the Lord stood next to him, and a light shone in the cell. So it's like, even, like if a light, even Brian this morning like turned on a light, and I was asleep and was like, oh. So it's like that didn't even get his attention. He had to be struck.
Yeah, like he's sitting to snooze.
It makes me wonder if he hasn't gone through some emotional turmoil.
Yeah.
Because he's just so exhausted, he just passed out.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
So like at what point during the night is he wrestling with the Lord, and at what point in the night he just passes out from exhaustion?
Well, you mentioned exhaustion. So Peter, James, and John, inner circle. I mean, we see them doing all kinds of things with Jesus. And then we see Peter and John, even in the book of Acts, right, as we've talked about that previously. How much grief do you think Peter's dealing with when he hears about James's death?
Yeah, that would have had to have been so heavy, and not just like the heaviness. I feel like with murder comes an even deeper grief, you know, of the injustice, but then also the heaviness of like, they're starting this church and they don't really have a clue either, so then fewer people to rely on. They've already lost Jesus. Now they've lost another important man. Like the burden of a church, and it was only one, like what every decision they made determined the direction of the church from that point. So the burden and responsibility of that, and then to lose a dear friend that you've had like the most intimate experiences with. I think you're right, Ashley. I think the grief had to have been so heavy.
That, and he's physically sitting up in between two people trying to sleep. There's just all these things that I feel like he just was passed out.
Yeah, and based on what you read in the story, does it seem like he has a pretty good idea of what's in front of him? I mean, does he? I mean, do you see that he recognizes, okay, he's not about to do time? So I mean, what kind of emotional toil could that take on him?
Yeah, and a lot of that, I think we've touched on this page, but just that, like, who's, okay, maybe I've accepted that I'm going to die, but who's going to take on the leadership after me? If James is gone and, I'm gone, like, who's going to lead the way?
Yeah.
And last week we talked about he just passed off the church. He opened the doors up to the Gentiles. They know even less.
Yeah.
It just gets really...
Yeah, so it's still very much in that early stages.
Yeah.
Well, what do we learn about God that he sent this angel, right, to do this? I mean, could God have worked this out in some other way?
Yeah, he could have worked through the people there and, had Herod let him go free, or, worked through the system instead of a supernatural event like this.
Yeah, because there were a lot of people that were pro early church, right?
The angel also doesn't come across to me as very kind. Just kicks in, get up, very commanding. Dress yourself.
Sweet.
It's like, come on. I don't know.
It is the bright light on.
Yes.
You're just like, oh.
but the angel doesn't like do any of the work. Like Peter has to do the things.
Yeah.
He has to get up. The angel doesn't get him up. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And he has to put his clothes on and follow. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say what any of that means, but I'll just
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Pointing it out, yeah.
but it does seem like he's kind of like, dude, really? I'm here to rescue you. Get your butt in gear.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it does. In all honesty, it's kind of like, you know, and Peter's like, oh, dude, hey man, you know, how you doing?
Yeah.
Put your clothes on.
He didn't even know he's awake.
Like, get your cloak. You know, so, I mean, so what do we learn about Peter that the angel's having to give him all these? And this is, as mothers, you know, do you see? Did he see any resemblance to? Okay. Now you got to have pants. So,
Yeah.
I mean, does anybody else see that kind of comparison there? Even as I was reading the story, it's like,
But I think he probably thought, hey, I may be dreaming this, you know? I may be, you know?
Yeah.
He may have thought that.
That's what I was thinking too, because it says, you didn't finish reading that, but it says he thought he was seeing a vision, and I wasn't in here last week, but the week before we were just reading about the vision that he had. So it's like he's had visions before.
Yeah.
He knows what it's like, and in his mind, he's having that same experience right now. So it wasn't, I don't know, there was something, I mean, you know, C.S. Lewis, and they talk about when Aslan comes, like you can feel the magic. It's almost like Peter is just kind of like, oh wait, I've had this kind of thing before. So it's almost like he didn't recognize his role in it, because he is assuming he's just an observer. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know the significance of that, but it's just like, yeah, he's not recognizing this isn't a dream. This is war.
Oh, go ahead.
well, I was going to say, let's just do that last part and hold that, and we'll get right to that. So Peter went out and followed him, and he didn't know that what was being done by the angel was real, because he thought he was seeing a vision. So when they passed the first and the second guard, they came to the outer gate leading into the city. The gate opened for them of its own accord. They went out and went along the street, and immediately the angel left him. And when Peter came to himself, he goes, now I'm sure that the Lord has sent his angel to rescue me from the hand of Herod and from all that the Jewish people were expecting.
I'm
So,
sure he was.
So he's thinking this is a vision. So what was it?
I was just going to say that it's funny. I'm going to do what you were doing and pull up the other stories. But, you know,
I'm sorry, I'm such a bad example.
like, it seems like, because I was thinking of the other vision where God says, kill and eat. Like, it's very, like, matter of fact, straightforward.
Just do
Same
it.
thing with these commands.
Yeah.
You know, and I was thinking about what you've said in previous sermons about Peter, that it's like, all right, like, you need to hear it with no frills. You know what I mean? Just like, here's the message. But I don't know. That was all I was going to say, actually.
When we were reading through it, it made me wonder if there's anything that I've ever called a vision in my life. Maybe it wasn't what he's talking about.
A little different.
I don't know that I've had this happen. Or that I've had something happen to where when a real thing happened that I would mix the two up.
Confuse them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, what do we learn? The fact that, you know, so this angel, he finally gets Peter dressed. You know? And so then they go by the first set of guards. Then they go by a second set of guards.
And apparently those guards couldn't see him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what do we? I mean, what do you all see here supernaturally taking place? And we're not told explicitly in the story, right? But do you think the odds are that the guards were sleeping or something else going on?
The fact that 6 guys were completely oblivious to an angel and a man walking. Like,
I don't think they were all asleep.
no.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-mm.
Or maybe the angel caused them all to fall asleep.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh, yeah, that's a possibility.
Oh
But-
yeah,
but-
that could have happened, but I don't think that they all on their own accord went to sleep. All
Yeah.
of them. I don't think so.
Well, especially if these were guards, you know, if they, I don't know if they were guards for 24 hours, but Romans, they had a very strict regiment and structure.
They did. These might not have been Romans.
Oh, okay.
We're not told that
Okay.
because Herod was
Jewish.
Jewish,
Okay.
and so these could have been possibly, but we're not told specifically, right?
Okay.
But
Okay.
they are soldiers.
Okay.
You know, because Herod had the temple had their own soldiers. Herod would have had his own soldiers.
I never even thought
Yeah.
about that.
So you know, you've got that whole, you know, that there's a conglomeration of political things going on here, and we tend to see it like our culture of, oh, it's the state police, it's the military, it's all the same. But there's a bunch of different, you know, a bunch of different folks with authority. So
Yeah.
Interesting. I didn't think about that. That, like, what if the guards were, I don't know, this is maybe really projection, but, you know, what if some of the guards were for the way? That they weren't part of the Roman government and they were kind of like, I don't know, I'm not trying to take away the supernatural aspect of
Yeah.
it. But,
well, when we do the story next week, I think we'll probably see that the guards may not
Okay.
have been.
Oh, okay.
So just to
I'm
give
trying
you
to
a
stay
little,
in the story.
just to give you just a little nudge there. So what do we learn about Peter? That finally the door opens by itself. So we've got, you know, there's some supernatural stuff going on here, right? So what do we learn about Peter? That the angel leaves, and Peter's suddenly like, oh,
Because he's out, he's not there anymore.
yeah, he's in the street. You know,
Yeah.
he's standing out on the street like, oh, I understand that God's delivered me from, you know, Herod and what the people and what the Jewish people were expecting. So the fact that that he says the Jewish people were expecting this, does it seem like he has knowledge of what Herod's plan was? I mean, does it seem like Herod may have proclaimed this?
Well, if he killed James, then it's like there really wouldn't be much suspicion as to what his plan
And then
was.
his father had the authority to kill John the Baptist.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
he had some authority, but not the Romans would have been over him because he was like.
well
the
he actually
governor.
served. Yeah, but he served under the Roman. I mean,
Yeah.
he was a Roman more than he was a Jew. I'll put it that
He
way.
was on their good. He
and-
got on
and-
their good side. So
And he was extremely well. All the Herods were extremely well connected, especially his grandfather Herod the Great. But yeah. So what do we learn about Peter from the fact that he's now he's standing out in the cool air in the street, right? And he's like, "Oh, God has rescued me."
I think he's thinking, God's got something else for me to do before they kill me.
Well, and he's maybe more like us than I would give him credit for, because he wasn't in that jail being like, it is a definite fact that he's going to get me out of this jail.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Well, it's just funny to me that, and again, I think I've got like all this like. There's a feeling when a angel is near, because it's not until after the angel leaves
Yeah.
that he then recognizes, oh, this isn't a vision. Like, it's clearly that he's alone by himself, and then acknowledges what happened. So it's just like, I don't know. It just seems like there was some kind of veil over Peter as well. And maybe that was the kindness of the Lord, because if there were all kinds of guards and gates and you're like, okay, just get up and walk through, I would be so hesitant. Like, I'd be trying to tiptoe,
Yeah.
you know, like,
Yeah.
yes, like, so terrified that I would do something that then would hinder whatever this work was that God was doing. So it's, I don't know if that was just the Lord giving an extra set of protection for him to not realize what he was going through, so then he didn't, you know, do something that, well, obviously he couldn't have messed up what God was planning, but
Yeah, well,
But I do think that, I was going to say that too, that I thought that maybe I might take back a little bit about what I said about the angel being unkind. Because, you know, like, the angel could have said, you know, get up, put your clothes on, and go on out to the street.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
leave. You know,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
instead, like, he says, follow me. And it's like, I'm with you until you're all the way through.
Oh,
You know
yeah.
what I mean?
yeah.
Which was a sweet provision.
Well, and in
Yes.
some ways you can look at it as he just kind of led him through as he was sleepwalking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of like you leave
Yeah.
your kids if you ever wake them up while you're on vacation and try to get them out the door at like 5 a.m. so you can make it home, and you just like lead them. They're not really awake. And so I wonder if God didn't give him that experience so that he would be able to look back and say, I didn't have anything to do with that.
Oh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what do we learn about God from the fact that he delivers Peter from, you know, what was sure death, right?
That
He has something else for him to do.
Okay. Yeah, kind of goes back to what you all were talking about with the early, you know, it's the church is in that still very early stage of development that God's plan, and kind of goes to what you were saying, but that he couldn't mess up.
Yeah. Yeah, and kind of that if God, like, there's not, I mean, we say these quotes like, you know, what's impossible with man is possible with God.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's true. Like, if God's purposes are for him to continue and, you know, do some other ministry, that he's going to make it happen no matter how.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
it's in our typical, you know, way of doing life or not.
And I'm sure he put it on Peter's heart to want to do that. You know, he's been bringing him to this point for a long time to where he really wants to bring up the early church.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he was probably like, I thought I was going to do that, and now I'm going to die. So it's sweet of him to say, no, you're not going to die. You get to do it. So.
Well, but I do want to contrast, because it's real easy with this story to go, oh, look, God delivers his people. This is awesome. You know, I mean, with what's going on in Ukraine right now, there's going to be people who are going to have supernatural experiences with God, but then there are hundreds that have died, right? So what do we learn about God from the fact he delivered Peter, but James was beheaded?
His ways are above ours.
So,
I think it's one of those things, just what Johnny was saying this morning and he was guiding us to pray. It's like, you have to trust the sovereignty of God and that he knows his plan and that he's working out his plan. But for us to think that we're going to get it, you know, isn't like, I know for me, having, oh, sorry, Dad, I can wait. I'm jumping into the personal. Sorry. Do you want me to wait?
We can do that.
no, we can do that right now.
That's
So,
it now.
Okay, sorry. But like for me, when we walked through everything with Elise and God saved her life, like there was such joy and celebration in that. But then because of her situation, other people would contact me. I have a friend in a situation like yours, and it was like 3 different ones, and every single one the child died. And then there's a lot of guilt with that. Like,
oh yeah,
why?
Yeah.
Like, why did God choose? Because then you know, and I tell her story, and I'm like, oh, God answered prayer, but then that doesn't mean that the other people weren't praying for their child too.
Right.
You know, so
Right.
it's this kind of thing is so hard. How what you know can be similar circumstances, someone arrested for the purpose of death. And how God saves one and then doesn't save the other. Like, we can't understand that. And so just having to trust, like, gosh, he knows what he's doing, and having to be willing to trust him on the times where it turns out the way that we really want, and then the times that it doesn't, and I mean, that's how it was for me too, having my miscarriage first,
Right.
and then having Elise. It was just, it was grief on both ends, like how to grapple with the loss and then the life too.
Yeah, and I got to be real honest. For me, that whole experience with the miscarriage and then Elise was probably my greatest spiritual struggle as a mature believer, because when all that happened, Paige had pulled me aside before I went to Guatemala to tell me she was going to announce on Thanksgiving Day, because I was going to be gone. I was gone on Thanksgiving, that she was pregnant. And so we'd actually gone out to lunch, and she told me, we're going to tell the family on Thanksgiving. And so sure enough, I'm in Guatemala, and I get a video of Elijah reading the thing, and everybody's whoop whoop, oh, that's awesome. And then later on that same day.
No, it was a month. No, it was
Christmas, right?
it was December 19th. So a month, about
Okay.
a little less.
Okay. Then I got the notification of, it's like, wow. And then when her water broke, I was in Costa Rica at a training, and I've been gone from home for like 2.5, almost 3 weeks at that point, and I was kind of like, wow, God, if this way you treat your friends, I mean, honestly, it was, we've done all these things right. And now, here you go. Somebody you love has cancer, somebody's having a miscarriage, and now it looks like we're going to have a second miscarriage. And it was a real test for me. And Andrew and I have talked about this, because he went through some of the same thing with his brother-in-law's death, that in our heart of hearts, we never would have verbalized it, and probably would not have consciously been willing to admit it, but we kind of thought, because we're doing all these things for the God, then we get then we get special dispensation to not have to deal with some of the things that the world deals with, right? And the fact that I believed that as a mature believer was really humbling, and just what was a great lesson for me.
Oh, because that's us believing the prosperity gospel.
It is.
It
is.
And
Have
this,
enough faith and
yes, and even this like checklist. If I do all these good things, then God owes me.
Yeah.
Instead of like having a heart that's just like, I love Jesus, and therefore these are the things I desire to do. It's like not out of obligation that we're doing them, but just out of like worship.
Well, what are some things in this story that you see that you could apply to your own life to help you in the future? I mean, what are some practical things you see here?
Probably that we should always be aware of what's happening, that it may have something, that God may mean this for something else, for us to impact. Because Elise's situation and everything has had a lot of impact on a lot of people. But I don't think it had as much impact on anybody as it did Sonny. Not in their family. That had more impact on him than anything in years. I mean, you all don't know that, but but that I've never seen anything have as much impact on him as that did in all our lives. I really have.
And she's even talking about a spiritual impact.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I wonder, is there anything in this? Is there anything in this story, that the Lord might be speaking to us about? That, okay, in response to what the Spirit is saying through the story, there's something I should do, like this week. There's something I need to talk to somebody, or I need to take some step, or can anybody think anything that?
I think this is one of those reminders to there is a line here of like us doing things too, but just not taking on that burden of it's up to me to propel this forward, whether it's my kids or whatever I'm in charge of. That like it's not up to me to make it happen. You know what I mean? That's what I'm saying. There's a line there. Like I'm not just gonna go to sleep and whatever. But just not feeling like, Peter at the end, that it's like who's gonna, we were talking about the projecting his thoughts, but who's gonna take on this role of leading the early church if I die. But that especially just in light of discipling my own kids, and that, I think that's such a hard thing as a parent, of feeling like I'm responsible if they accept Christ or not, or what their life turns out like it's all on me,
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. Yeah, and that is and you look around and you see folks that you're like, man, I watched their lives. They were consistent, and yet somebody in their family chose something different. So, yeah. Well, there's 2 more stories coming after this one. Next week is a funny story, and then the week after that is a don't mess with God story. So it's
Sapphira and Ananias.
It,
That one
you-
always is like,
oh,
I
this
just
one,
read that one this week, and it's just like,
this one is worse
Okay.
than Ananias and Sapphira.
now I'm gonna have to go and look
I
ahead.
know.
I'm sorry.